That autumn, I took a trip back to the cabin, hoping for some quiet and solitude. I needed a break from the noise of the city, the constant hum that had kept me up night after night. As soon as I arrived, though, something felt off. The trees seemed darker, the air heavier. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to stress, and unloaded my bags, preparing to settle in. But the silence that night wasn't peaceful. It was thick and eerie, like the whole forest was holding its breath. The first night was restless. Around midnight, I heard the sound of footsteps crunching over leaves, slow and deliberate. It was close, too close to be anything wandering aimlessly. I peered out the window, but saw nothing except shadows. Still, something felt wrong. My pulse quickened. Must be a deer, I whispered to myself, closing the curtains. But the unease lingered, and sleep was out of the question. The next morning, I decided to take a walk around the property, hoping to find some peace in daylight. Rimforte, as usual, was beautiful in autumn. The amber leaves, the cool air, the towering trees casting long, comforting shadows. But as I walked along the creek, I noticed something strange. The unmistakable marks of footprints leading into the woods from my cabin. My heart raced as I studied them. They were large, oddly shaped, and seemed to drag in places. I followed them for a bit, but they disappeared near the edge of the forest, swallowed by the dense undergrowth. Back at the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder and swear I saw something shift in the distance, just beyond the edge of my vision. That evening, as the sun set, I double-locked the door, closed every window, and kept the lights low. Night fell, and with it, the same footsteps. But this time, they were closer, almost as if circling the cabin. My heart pounded as I strained to listen, holding my breath. Then came a quiet, echoing whisper. "Neighbor, neighbor." A shiver ran down my spine. Till, or what would be calling my name in this isolated place. Just then, my phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from my friend and neighbor Ben, who lived about 20 miles away. "Everything get out there, Nate?" The message read. I typed back quickly. "Not really. I keep hearing things. It's strange out here. Be careful," he replied. As if on cue, there was a loud thud against the wall. I froze, dread creeping up my spine. Slowly, I crept to the window and peered out. In the fading twilight, I saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the trees, tall, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaky. The figure didn't move. It simply stood, watching, as if waiting for something. I stepped back, pulling the curtain closed, my mind racing. The next morning, Ben showed up, concerned and armed with stories about the parasite. We sat on the porch and smoking a cigarette, his face lined with worry. "Folks around here say he's been here for centuries," Ben explained. "The hollow parasite's a protector of the forest, but he doesn't like strangers." "I'm not a stranger," I argued. "I've been coming here since I was a kid." "Doesn't matter," Ben replied, his tone grave. "The parasite doesn't care if you're familiar. Once he set his sights on you, well, there's not much you can do." That evening, Ben decided to stay, hoping to catch a glimpse of the figure. As night fell, the forest grew silent, and we waited. Hours passed, and just when we began to think maybe it was all in my head, there was a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat. Ben and I exchanged a glance, then cautiously opened the door. No one was there, but a thick fog had rolled in, swirling around the cabin. And through it, we heard that same whisper. "Nate." Ben's face went pale. "It's him," he muttered, backing away from the door. The hollow parasite. I couldn't take it anymore. The relentless footsteps, the whispers, the feeling of dread, it was all too much. That night, I decided I'd confront the parasite myself. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a surge of adrenaline, I stepped outside, Ben following close behind. "Nate, this is insane," Ben whispered, but I couldn't turn back. I needed answers. We crept toward the tree line, where I'd last seen him. The fog thickened, and suddenly, there he was, just beyond the reach of my flashlight, his hollow eyes staring into mine. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The parasite tilted his head, an almost human gesture, and I felt an inexplicable chill. Then he spoke, his voice like the rustle of leaves in the wind. "You disturbed the hollow. Leave or stay forever." Ben and I exchanged a panicked glance. Without another word, we turned and bolted back to the cabin, locking the door behind us. The parasite didn't follow, but we could feel his presence, his gaze lingering long after we'd retreated inside. The next morning, Ben and I packed our things and left Rimforte. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of the parasite standing at the edge of the forest, watching us leave. I haven't been back since, and even now, years later, I sometimes wake up to the sound of footsteps outside my window or the faint whisper of my name in the wind. Even though I'd promised myself I'd never return, Rimforte haunted me. Night after night, I'd wake up hearing that familiar whisper, "Nate," fading into the wind. I'd check outside my city apartment, convincing myself it was just a memory, an echo of fear playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something from Rimforte had latched onto me, a shadow of the parasite's presence lingering. One evening, I got a call from my younger sister, Lila. "Nate, I don't know how to say this," she started, her voice trembling. "I've been staying at the cabin, to paint. I thought it'd be peaceful, but it isn't." "Lila, you're at the cabin?" I sat up, the hair on my arms rising. "Yes, but it's strange. Every night, I hear something, footsteps. And Nate is calling my name." My throat tightened. Lila had no idea what I'd experienced, and I hadn't planned on telling her. I thought she'd dismiss it as some late-night horror story. But now, the hollow parasite had found her too. "Pack up," I told her firmly. "I'm coming to get you." By the time I reached Rimforte, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the valley. Lila waited on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale. "Thank you for coming," she said, hugging me tight. "Nate, I don't know what's happening here. Every night, it feels like something's watching me." "I know, Lila," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think the cabin is not safe." Inside, the cabin felt colder than it should. I could see Lila's paintings scattered across the room. Beautiful scenes of the creek, trees bending over the water, and the golden light of autumn. But there was one painting shoved into the corner that drew my eye. It was a dark figure, tall and hollow-eyed, standing in the mist near the trees. My heart skipped a beat. "Lila, when did you paint this?" I asked, not taking my eyes off it. She hesitated. "I don't remember really. It came to me like something I had to paint." As darkness fell, I decided we wouldn't spend another night here. We'd leave first thing in the morning, but my instincts told me we wouldn't make it through the night undisturbed. Around midnight, the air turned heavy, and I sensed it before I heard it. The soft crunch of footsteps circling the cabin. Lila tensed beside me, clutching my arm as we listened, each step bringing with it a sense of dread. Suddenly, the whisper started. "Neighbor, Nayla, it's calling my name," she breathed, terror in her eyes. "I know," I whispered, holding her close. "Just stay calm." But the whispers grew louder, circling the cabin in a haunting loop, weaving through the air like an echo from every direction. I remembered what Ben had said. Once the parasite sets his sights on you, there's no escaping. Desperate, I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out onto the porch. The fog had rolled in thick, a sea of gray enveloping the trees. And just at the edge of my vision, I saw the parasite, his form half hidden in the mist, hollow eyes staring directly at me. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He tilted his head, just as he had the first time I saw him, and that eerie whisper drifted toward me again. "Leave or stay forever." My stomach turned as I felt the weight of his words. "Leave or stay forever." In a moment of reckless bravery, I shouted back, "Why are you doing this? We don't belong to you." But the parasite merely stared, his eyes gleaming with something like pity. The fog thickened, swallowing his form, and in a flash, he was gone. Back inside, I was rummaging through a cabinet when I came across an old journal. I'd never noticed it before, an old leather-bound book covered in dust. As I opened it, pages yellowed with age, I realized it had belonged to my great-grandfather, William Harris. His entries were short, but filled with worry about Rimforte, strange sightings, and warnings from the locals about the parasite. October 13th, 1942, the valley feels different these days. Saw a figure in the trees last night, watching me. Locals call it the hollow parasite. They say once it appears, it will haunt you until you leave the valley or go mad. Another entry sent a chill down my spine. October 15th, 1942, heard it calling my name last night. Pack my bags. This valley belongs to something older and darker than I can understand. I won't be returning. I looked at Wyla. We have to leave? It's not safe here, Grandpa knew that too. We packed our things in record time, throwing them into the car as fast as we could. I started the engine, the headlights cutting through the thick fog, and we sped down the narrow dirt road that led out of Rimforte. But as we drove, I saw him again. The parasite stood by the roadside, his hollow eyes following us. I pressed the gas pedal harder, trying to shake the feeling that he was still with us. Just as we reached the valley's edge, the car sputtered and stalled. My heart sank. I turned the key, hoping it would start up again, but the engine only groaned. I looked at Lila, her face pale, as we heard footsteps approaching through the fog. Stay in the car. I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I could do. Then his voice filled the car, echoing through every inch of space. You disturbed the hollow. Leave or stay forever. The headlights flickered, and there he was standing in front of us, his hollow eyes glowing in the dark. I held Lila's hand tightly as the fog closed in around us, and for a moment, it felt like we were sinking, drawn back to the valley no matter how hard we fought to leave. But as suddenly as it began, the fog lifted, and the car started again. We drove in silence, neither of us daring to speak until we were miles away from the valley. Weeks went by, but the memories of that night lingered, like a dark stain that couldn't be washed away. Rimforte felt like a bad dream, but the parasite, he was real. I knew that now. I couldn't shake the feeling that his warning had been more than just words. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my apartment. I sat up, heart racing, but saw nothing. I lay back down, trying to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But then I heard it, a soft whisper drifting through the silence. Nay, no matter where I went, the parasite would be there, a guardian of Rimforte, a silent reminder of a place I'd never truly left. After the incident with Lila, I couldn't shake the feeling that the parasite's reach extended far beyond Rimforte. I'd wake up some nights with his whisper ringing in my ears, or catch a glimpse of movement in my periphery, only to find nothing there. I was being haunted, or maybe worse, marked. Determined to get answers, I returned to the town closest to Rimforte, hoping someone there might know something. Lila refused to join me, understandably shaken by her own experience. But she asked me to be careful, her voice laced with worry as she warned me. Nate, whatever you find there, don't let it follow you back. The town had that same eerie calm I remembered, like everyone that was quietly guarding a secret. I stopped by the local library, asking the librarian, a gray-haired woman named Chloe, about local legends. She looked at me with narrowed eyes. You're one of the Harris family, aren't you? She asked, her voice carrying a hint of sympathy. You're not the first from your family to come looking for answers. I nodded, my curiosity piqued. You mean my grandfather? She leaned in, her voice a murmur. And his father before him, William Harris, right? The one who kept that old cabin up in the valley. I knew him well. Her voice softened, and she looked out the window as if remembering something painful. William saw things in that valley, things he never should have seen. When I pressed her, Chloe told me about an old man named Brendan Bush, a reclusive resident who lived on the outskirts of town. He'd apparently spent years researching the legend of the hollow parasite, and might have insights that could help me. Be careful, Nate, Chloe warned as I left. Sometimes, digging too deep brings things to the surface you can never bury again. Finding Brennan Bush's house was no easy task. It was nestled in the woods, surrounded by trees and thick underbrush, as if nature was trying to hide him away. I knocked on the door, and after a long pause, an old man with a thin frame and piercing eyes answered. "So," he said, eyeing me up and down, "you're another one of the Harris boys." He didn't ask why I was there. He already knew. "Come in." His house was filled with stacks of books and papers, old photos, and maps of the valley. Rimforte, he began, settling into his chair, isn't just any old valley. It's a place to boundary of sorts. There are energies there, ancient forces we don't understand, and the Parasite is part of that force. He showed me a collection of photographs of the valley taken over the years, each one featuring a dark, shadowy figure in the background. I try to document him, you see, Hugh explained. Try to understand. But the more I saw him, the more I felt his presence creeping into my life. Hugh leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. The hollow Parasite isn't just a ghost or a demon. He's a guardian, a gatekeeper. He protects the valley, but he also claims those who trespass. Claims them? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. Hugh nodded. Once you've seen him, he's marked you. You carry a piece of the valley with you. That's why you're here, isn't it? You feel him with you, don't you? I didn't answer, but the look on my face told him enough. He sighed. There's no escaping him, son. You can try to live with it, but he'll always be there, in the shadows, watching, waiting. That night, I stayed at a nearby motel, planning to leave town first thing in the morning. But sleep brought no comfort. Instead, I found myself in a vivid, unsettling dream. In the dream, I was back in the valley, walking alone through the dense fog. The trees loomed tall and shadowed, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. I could hear the Parasite's voice calling me, a soft, distant whisper that grew louder with every step. Nate! I tried to turn back, but the path behind me had vanished. My heart pounded as the fog thickened, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. Then through the mist, I saw him, standing still, his hollow eyes fixed on me. What do you want? I called out, my voice echoing through the valley. But he didn't answer. Instead, he raised a long, bony finger and pointed to the ground. I looked down, seeing the dirt shifting and moving, as if something beneath the earth was clawing its way up. I woke up gasping, my body drenched in sweat. The memory of his hollow eyes lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder that the Parasite would never let me go. Desperation drove me back to Rimforte. I needed answers, closure, something that could end this nightmare once and for all. With Hugh's warning echoing in my mind, I packed my things and headed back to the cabin, prepared to confront the Parasite if that's what it took. I spent the first night alone, armed with only a flashlight and my determination. The valley was silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As the hours passed, I began to doubt myself, wondering if this was all just some twisted figment of my imagination. But then, as the clock neared midnight, I heard it, the faint sound of footsteps approaching the cabin. My heart pounded as I turned off the flashlight, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Through the window, I saw a shadow moving toward the cabin, its form barely visible in the darkness. The Parasite stopped just outside, his hollow eyes staring through the window, locking onto mine. I felt a shiver run down my spine as his voice echoed in my mind. You cannot leave. The valley remembers. In that moment, I understood the depth of his warning. Rimforte wasn't just a place. It was a part of me now, a piece of my soul bound to its shadows and secrets. Desperate to break free from his grasp, I turned to the journal again, hoping to find something I'd missed. There, in one of the last entries, my great-grandfather had written about a ritual, a way to make peace with the Parasite. The instructions were vague, but they involved an offering of personal items at the valley center. a symbolic gesture to acknowledge the parasite's claim over the land. I gathered a few of my things, my father's watch, a locket my mother had given me, a small journal I kept since childhood. They were personal, sentimental pieces of my identity that I hoped would appease the parasite. In the dead of night, I ventured out to the valley's center, guided by the light of a waning moon. The trees towered over me, their branches casting twisted shadows on the ground. I placed the items in a small clearing, speaking softly, my voice trembling. "I acknowledge you," I said, my words barely a whisper. "I respect this place. Please, let me go." For a moment, the valley was silent, and I thought maybe, just maybe, the ritual had worked. But then I felt a presence behind me, the air growing cold as the parasite appeared, his hollow eyes fixed on me. He reached out, his hand hovering over the offering, and for the first time, I saw something like emotion flicker in his expression, acceptance perhaps, or understanding. Then, as quickly as he'd appeared, he was gone, fading into the fog that rolled over the valley. I left Rimforte that night, my heart pounding, hoping that the ritual had freed me from his grasp. Back in the city, life slowly returned to normal. The whispers stopped, and the shadows that had once haunted me seemed to fade away. Lila and I talked about our experience, sharing a quiet understanding of the valley's power. Neither of us planned to return to Rimforte, but we both knew that a part of us would always carry the weight of its secrets. Every so often, I'd feel a chill or catch a glimpse of a shadow out of the corner of my eye, but I reminded myself that the valley had let me go, that I'd made peace with the parasite. Still, late at night, when the city was silent and my mind drifted back to that eerie valley, I couldn't help but wonder, had I really escaped the hollow parasite's grasp? Or had he simply let me go, knowing that someday I'd be drawn back to the shadows of Rimforte? Months passed since my encounter with the parasite, yet life in the city felt more surreal than ever. I threw myself into my work, a desperate attempt to drown out the memories of Rimforte. Lila often checked in, her concern palpable in every message. "Nee, you still okay?" she'd text. "You don't seem like yourself." "Yeah, just busy," I'd reply, forcing a smile through the screen. But I wasn't okay. The shadows lingered, and dreams of the valley continued to haunt my nights. Sometimes I'd wake up to find myself whispering words of the ritual, the offerings etched into my memory. And in those moments, I feared the parasite was watching me still, this presence lurking in the corners of my mind. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, I met up with Lila at a cafe. "You've been avoiding talking about it," she said, her gaze unwavering. "What really happened in Rimforte?" I hesitated, the weight of the memories pressing down. "I saw him, Lila. The parasite. He was real. And I think he knows me." Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I did a ritual to try to make peace," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes I feel like I still carry him with me. It's like he's always just beyond my reach." Lila leaned forward, her voice firm. "You need to confront this. You can't let him control you like this." The next day, I decided to reach out to Brennan Bush again. If anyone could help me understand what was happening, it was him. I drove back to his house, the familiar winding roads leading me back to the edges of Rimforte. When I arrived, he seemed to expect me, as if he'd been waiting. "I knew you'd come back," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "You need to talk about it, don't you?" I nodded, relieved to be able to share the weight of my experience. "The parasite, he hasn't left me. I feel like I'm losing my grit." Hugh leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "You're not the first to feel this way. The parasite has a way of embedding himself into the minds of those who venture into his domain. The more you resist, the stronger his hold becomes." "What do I do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Hugh stroked his chin thoughtfully. "You must return to Rimforte, but this time with a clearer purpose. Seek out the source of his power. There are stories of an old shrine hidden in the valley, a place where the boundaries between our world and the next are weakest. It may hold the answers you seek. Do you know where it is?" I pressed, sealing a flicker of hope. I can help guide you, but you must go alone. The parasite thrives on fear and distraction. You need to face him without the noise of others clouding your mind. That night, I packed my bags for another trip to Rimforte. This time, I felt a mix of dread and determination. Lila insisted on coming with me. Her fierce loyalty, a comfort amidst my turmoil. I won't let you do this alone, she said firmly, her eyes steady. The next day, we drove back to the valley, the landscape shifting as we approached the familiar winding roads. As we parked near the old cabin, an unsettling silence enveloped us. The air felt sick, as if the valley was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. We need to find that shrine, I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. We started hiking into the woods, guided by Hugh's directions and a map I'd managed to piece together from his notes. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches intertwining like grasping hands. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the parasite was watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. After hours of searching, we stumbled upon a clearing illuminated by a shaft of sunlight breaking through the canopy. In the center stood an ancient stone structure, weathered by time, vines wrapping around its edges like tendrils of fate. There it is. I breathed, the sight filling me with both awe and trepidation. As we approached, a chill settled in the air, and I could feel a weight pressing down on my chest. What do we do? Wyla asked, glancing around nervously. I don't know, I admitted, but we have to try something. We stepped closer to the shrine, noticing carvings etched into the stone. Symbols and images that seemed to depict the valley's history, its guardians, and there, an outline of the parasite himself. I ran my fingers over the cool surface, feeling an electric tingle beneath my skin. This place is alive, I murmured. Do you think it will help? Lila asked, her voice wavering. It has to, I said, drawing in a shaky breath. I'll try to connect with it, see if it reveals anything. I closed my eyes, focusing on the energy of the shrine. I envisioned the offerings I'd left behind, the watch, the locket, the journal, hoping that the valley would recognize my intention. I acknowledge you, hollow parasite, I whispered, my voice steady. I seek understanding and peace. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the clearing, causing the leaves to rustle violently. Lila grabbed my arm, her grip tight. Nate, what's happening? Just stay close, I shouted over the roar of the wind, trying to center myself. In the chaos, I felt a presence coalesce around us, the air growing thick with anticipation. The parasite materialized from the shadows, his hollow eyes locking onto mine. This time, he didn't seem menacing. Rather, there was a haunting sadness in his gaze. Nate, he whispered, the sound echoing in my mind. You seek to know? Yes, I replied, my heart pounding. Why are you here? What do you want? The parasite stepped closer, and I could feel the weight of centuries behind him, the stories of all those who had come before me. I'm the guardian of this place, he said, his voice resonating in the air. But I'm also a part of you now. I don't want to be part of this, I exclaimed, desperation clawing in my throat. I just want to leave. Leaving is not the answer, he replied, his tone firm yet gentle. You must embrace the knowledge of this valley. Accept its history, its burdens. Only then can you find peace.